Now it is time to bring up some of the oldest and wisest and grumpiest, perhaps, no, maybe, game directors that we had. I'd like to welcome onto stage Paradox luminary and creative director Johan Andersson, and also welcome game director extraordinaire Martin Anward. Have a seat, gentlemen. Do you know what we're talking about?
That's a good question.
That's a good question. We are talking about EU4, and more specifically, what could have been, and paths not traveled, and stuff like that. We haven't planned this out a lot because I don't think the three of us need to plan out a conversation. Generally, they tend to happen by themselves. But for people watching at home or in your local pub, please log into Discord and if the PDXCON Discord and fill out questions. I will be taking questions for these fine gentlemen. But let's start. Not everyone here knows who you are, and why should they? Please, Johan, tell us who are you and why are you here?
I'm Johan. At one of the first PDXCONs, I introduced myself by saying, "Hey, I'm Johan, I'm Paradox." 15 years ago, that might have been true, but...
Yes. Yes, you're 485th of a Paradox, that's correct.
Yes.
But very influential. So what have you done in the past?
I've been doing a lot of game series. I can be blamed for the Europa Universalis series, some more perhaps, but...
what are you most proud of?
I was asked this question earlier. It's like, I would say... It's hard to tell, but EU4 was probably one of the games I'm most proud of doing.
It is nice. Okay, moving on. Martin, who are you and what have you done?
All right, so I'm Martin Anward. I am a game director, although I can't actually talk about what I'm game director of. I came in as AI programmer, and I've been on a bunch of different projects, including EU4. Otherwise, I don't think I would be here talking EU4 memories. And I was also game director of Stellaris for quite a while after the release of the game.
Fantastic. What are you most proud of during your years at Paradox?
I would say I'm absolutely most proud of the work I've done on Stellaris and the expansions we did, especially the way we sort of changed the game, 2.0 and all that. So yeah, that is definitely the high point of my career so far.
I would definitely agree. Very good job on Stellaris. Do you have any Stellaris fans here? Great. How about EU fans and EU fans? Slightly more, and you're in luck because we're going to talk about EU. There you go. Okay, so let's start, Johan. We'd made EU3 and released in 2007.
Yeah.
And then we decided at some point to make EU4. You remember we made EU3 Complete Edition.
Yeah.
And then realized, shit, we need to do more expansions.
Yeah.
And then where do you go from after Complete Edition? Well, Complete Edition 2 was a name we played around with. We used, what was it called in the end?
Chronicles.
Yes, that was what it was called. So talk us about what could have EU4, where could it have gone at that stage? Because do you want to maybe describe where we ended up and then talk about where we could have gone in terms of EU?
Well, a lot of people have said through the years that we're dumbing down games and making them more casual and so. EU4 is the only game we've made where the stated ambition was partially make it more the original pitch that I talked, me and Fred worked out together was it should be 25% focus on mechanics and new gameplay, 25% focus on a better UI, 25% better focus on better graphics, and 25% on multiplayer. So that's
very clean.
That was the entire vision and plan for the project.
Did you never envision there being another split there, another do it 15% or whatever and put in something else? Did you consider having a fifth there instead of fourths?
There would have been 20% then. Maths.
My math, let's get in there. But did you consider having a major other thing in there, or was it just did it write itself from the get-go?
Yeah, we thought 25% was a good number, so that's why and there was the 4 areas where we wanted to focus on, because we had a lot of cool ideas for game mechanics. And there was basically 2 great features in the original game. That was like the core thing what we wanted to do for game mechanics. Rework the trade system, which we had the same trade system for EU1, 2, and 3. And in 4, we had with the flows of the trade nodes and so. Chris King designed that one. And of course, the major other thing that I know a lot of people have a certain name for, mana.
Beat sliders, yes.
Yes.
So let's do a quick show of hands. Who prefers sliders? The EU3 sliders. Show of hands. Who prefers mana? Okay, and who prefers something else? So and a lot of people don't prefer anything, I think.
Yeah. But in EU4 it worked out.
Yeah. No, but I actually remember that when I first came onto the project, because I came into the project like 9 months or so before release? Started 2013.
I can't remember. I'm an old
It was
guy.
something like that. And I remember just first playing it and being like, yeah, I like the monarch points. They did a lot to sort of slow your growth to actually make a lot of interesting and balanced decisions. I do think it was a big step forward for the game.
Yeah, it's like, it was such a great thing in EU4 and worked perfectly well there. It cannot be moved to other games that easily.
No, it shouldn't necessarily be in every game.
No.
Were there any things that you really wanted in the base version that was released in August of, 2013, that didn't make it in that version?
I think in the original design document for EU4, we wanted to have the random new world. That was one of the things I really wanted. But Thomas Johansson, who was the lead programmer and project lead, he said, please no, we can have it in a later expansion, but this is such a core function that we can't do it. And when we tried it in the first big expansion, it was, I would say, not our best feature ever in an expansion.
Could have used improvement.
Yeah.
Yes. But when you were in charge of the project, you reworked that entire feature.
Yeah, so it was actually kind of it was one thing I always wanted to do, because I always loved the idea of the random new world.
Yeah.
And I didn't think the feature was good enough. And at one point, I sort of ended up with an extra programmer, which doesn't happen that often. And just everything...
How did you manage to get an extra programmer?
Complete happenstance. And that person happened to be really interested in working on a new random new world system. So I managed to sort of do it on the side while we were working on an expansion, and the actual team were working on the other things. So that is basically how it ended up getting reworked. It was one of those things that was always at the back of my head, but we never had the resources for it. Suddenly, I had the resource for it, and it was like, let's do it. The betas made the vast majority of the tiles. I got a bunch of people to help out. I wrote a lot of code for actual distribution of countries myself, and it just sort of happened.
Yeah, it was awesome. I think I even made a tile for the system.
Oh, yes, you did.
Yes,
you did make
and
a
I'm
tile.
not entirely the best graphic artist in the world. Actually, I'm probably the worst graphic artist even in this group.
Even this group, okay, that's high praise for me.
But weren't you a level designer once upon a time?
I've done some level design in Magica, actually. It made it into the final game. So let me ask you, once the game was out, did you guys sit down and have discussions about directions the game could take, and discarded any directions or said, no, we definitely don't want to do that, and why? Because, I mean, we've expanded the game so many times in so many different ways, it kind of feels like we've covered almost the entire spectrum, but surely there are parts of the spectrum you decided, no, we don't want to go there.
Yeah, we made a conscious decision rather early on that we did not want to add pops, we did not want to add characters.
Why?
Because it's like pops, that's like Vicky, and characters are Crusader Kings, obviously Stellaris, Imperator, whatever, but it's like we didn't want to steal the core functionality from other games and make EU4 into the one and only perfect game.
Yeah. You don't really want too many, like pops, I would say is something you should build the game around. And you also don't want too many things in a game that you want to build the game around, because you end up with kind of a fuzzy focus of your foundation.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you then, because since I've played quite a bit of both EU at the time it came out and then CK, obviously we have some character mechanics in EU4 as well. So where do you draw, and we've expanded them as I understand with air mechanics and stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? Because at some point, CK started really blowing up. It was, I mean, it had a great launch, but it just continued growing like crazy and became this huge phenomenon. Did you consider doing more RPG stuff in EU?
No, this is a super conscious decision. We had a lot of discussions within the game directors at Paradox, and we realized we have a different focus and different feel of how we want to make games. Both me and Martin, we are, I would say, we're system-driven people. We're thinking about balance and mechanics. That's how we feel. And then it's like you have Henrik Freyes, one of the greatest game designers I've ever met in my entire life. He's a story-driven narrative developer. And that means that if I'm making a game, I should not make a story, narrative, Crusader Kings style gameplay, because I'm not good at it. And those games are the ones that those type of game directors should be doing. Me and Martin, we have different skill sets and different interests.
I would love to possibly make a story-driven game sometime, but I also think it's super important, the thing I said earlier, where you have to always bear in mind what is your game, what is the heart and soul of your game. Yeah. EU4 is very much a game about painting the map. It's a game about conquering, empire building. And whereas CK2 is much more of a game where the heart is the characters, the role-playing, the dynasties. Yeah. Stellaris is a game about exploration, Vicky 2, the heart is obviously the pops, the economy. There's just everything has its own place, and if you just try to put everything into the same game, you will end up with a sort of game that does all these things somewhat, but you can never really sense what is the soul of the game, what is the purpose of the game, because it's just trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain this focus within your teams? Because obviously, like, everyone's influenced by different type of things, and even if we like EU, obviously we like CK as well. So how do you maintain that focus and not losing clarity of what the soul and heart of the game is?
We've been working quite a lot on that through the years. You've been one of the driving persons of the term brand identity, and we have now a document that describes what is EU. It's basically, what is a one-pager or something? Yeah. What is the pillar? What defines an Europa Universalis game? What defines a Crusader Kings game? And it's the same like the game development pillars that we have at Paradox. I can't recite them, but chums know them by heart. Yeah. And it's like, you keep within the pillars of the game you're doing, and as long as you keep within that, you're pretty much free to do what you want.
And it also has the critical part of what isn't it, and what you shouldn't you do.
Yeah.
Okay, almost like less is more in a way. Okay.
Yeah, but less is more, but we usually like more is more.
Less is more, but more is also more.
Like Yngve Malmsteen says.
Do anyone here remember Hot Shrine Free? Yeah, some of you. The marketing campaign or whatever I sent was like, it's more.
Yeah. Okay, so any major regrets, or looking back now at EU, are there major decisions that you wish you would not have made? Can you be open about those? Or you just...
do you want to do that?
I designed the states.
Okay.
You can boo me now.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think, so that was one of those interesting things where I think we listened a little, or rather me at least, I listened a little too much to certain things that people said they wanted. We want this big focus on peacetime mechanics, we want more decisions, more things to do, and I'm like, well, great, I'll add this system, and you'll have to decide who to assign what land, it'll be important, except it turns out as I'm at war, I conquer a bunch of things, all my states are whining for provinces, and I can't be bothered. Estates are interesting if you're playing a small country, before the rework. If you're playing a small country and you can assign specific ones, you're like, oh, my traders in my trade center and so on. But when you Russia with 300 provinces, you just want them to stop complaining, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need to get super technical on this, but Henrik just now on stage was talking about the fact that when CK2 was made, they were intending to kind of work with it for 3-4 years and ran into some kind of technical dead ends and also design dead ends. What was the kind of plan for EU? Did you anticipate it running for this many? It's now getting quite, the past 6 years, right?
Yeah, well, I think we had we wanted to make a few expansions, but I mean, EU4 was launched, it's 1.5 year after CK2. We did not have the CK2 full experience. We knew that we could make a bunch of expansions.
Yeah.
So I think we had written down, after the first one, Conquest of the New
Conquest of Paradise.
Conquest of Paradise was the name. I wrote down 5 or 6 different themes and names, and first we had the Wealth of Nations. We had Art of War focus, and then it was different geographical areas. I pretty much mapped out everything.
I definitely remember that when I became project lead.
Yeah.
Also back then, project lead was different. It was also a designer, sort of manager, lead programmer. It was a lots of hats kind of role. And I remember that when I came in and started being in the design meetings more, and we're like, oh, here's this expansion design and that expansion design. And I also remember we would always be talking about make sure we had 3 or 4 expansion designs ready besides or ready to sort of start finishing up besides the one we were already on.
Yeah, and they were kind of vague the further away they were. It's Dharma, the only thing that existed for Dharma until a few months before starting was it should be India focus. We had nothing else. We just wanted that India focus and Dharma. And neither of us worked on Dharma. That was Jake's baby, but it was that was the agenda. We even have the name and the ideas for the next expansion that we're working on. That was written about 1 year after the release. And it's because we knew what we wanted to do and take the project.
But I think that's fairly general. We had the same approach on Stellaris as well, knowing sort of we want to do these big expansions and sort of in this order, but then things change.
Yeah.
But it is a good approach because you can look at it and you can say, well, we are doing this India expansion in a few years, and that means, or whenever we are doing it, and that means we probably shouldn't be doing this India feature right now.
No, and sometimes stuff come up Art of War is one of the most popular EU4 expansion we made. The map rework was basically something me and Henrik Lomander did during a summer, because it's no, we have to make the map density the same everywhere. So we just kept redrawing the map.
Yeah, I remember that when I would ask people what their favorite feature of Art of War was, and they would answer the map rework. And I would say, that's part of the free patch, right? And they would say, yep, but it's still my favorite feature.
That was funny. And should I be honest about why I wanted that one immediately? It was because I was playing Ming in a multiplayer campaign and got irritated that my wars took so much longer time than the others' wars, because it took long to march. And it's no, we have to have it standardized. First time in 50 years in EU history that we have the goal that the world should be standardized in size.
So can I ask, we talk about inspiration and other places, what non-Paradox game has influenced you and your work on EU the most, would you say?
Oh.
You can't say World of Warcraft.
No, because it doesn't influence that much. It just influences my soul and makes me happy.
Okay. Well, that's one thing.
Civilization.
Yeah. What? Anything in particular?
No, it's basically that Civilization is the greatest game of all times when it comes to influencing strategy games. I think Civ 2 is still the best, even if Civ 5 was fun.
Yeah.
After the expansions.
Yeah, after the expansion. What about you, Martin?
Oof, that's a really tough question.
It is.
If the non-Paradox game, because, I did kind of go from Total War games to Paradox games, but I don't know if that's the thing that inspired me the most. I would probably say Civ as well, just like that, but I'm not 100% on that answer.
And obviously it's very hard to talk about, none of these games exist in a vacuum. Whenever you play one game, it immediately informs or influences to some degree, even if you can't directly draw a line from a specific feature there to a specific feature there. But the overall advances in how things are done just permeate the design space when we deal with strategy games like this. Can you tell us anything about, as a result of, like, how often do you find yourself going back wishing you would have done something differently? Does that happen? Or are you guys very confident in what you've done over the years?
Oh,
It happens all the time.
yeah, I was going to say every day, multiple hours. It's like, when I was going to go out and do the Imperator in the announcement show, I'm like, oh shit, I'm going to go out here and people are going to boo me because Imperator was a failure. I always have a self-doubt about everything, every decision I make. I was like, did I make a good decision? Was this good? Was this bad? Was this great?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, not necessarily the questioning every decision, but you do think about the things you could have done, the decisions you could have made better, and the things you didn't do. Like, especially always just, you want to do this for a game or an expansion or whatever, and you end up doing this. The ambitions are always loftier than what you can actually get done, and that's the sort of thing at least I think about a lot, is what if I had sort of done this differently instead? How would the game looked?
Yeah.
I am generally fairly confident in the decisions I took, but not always.
Yeah, and sometimes you have like a really, really good example of like when a decision was bad, and you're like, I should have done it different, but I can't change the decision now. Like development in EU4, it's like it was an integral part of Common Sense so we couldn't make it free for a long time because it's like people had been paying for it. And it should have been free because we would have been able to build upon it so much better and would have made the game better. So
same with the States.
Yeah, same there. And I know that you took that approach quite a lot when you worked on Stellaris, that make sure that more things and more mechanics should be free. And that's something I've taken to heart a lot when we've been working on Imperator, that core functionality should be part of the free patch. It makes for better flexibility and better gameplay.
I mean, it sounds like you guys ended up with a game that has had the perfect kind of environment for you to have all these regrets and still be able to go back and actually then explore them and remake it, and over expansions and expansions explore all of these kind of ideas. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but both of you will be here at the show, and please go up to these folks and talk to them. You're both active in social media quite frequently. So feel free to ping them there as well. I can also mention that all our games, especially EU now, are 75% off on most distribution platforms. So it's a great time to try to get into the games and try them. So thank you so much, Johan and Martin, and I will see you at the rest of PDXCon.
Thank you.